Hey guys, it's Max. How is everybody doing? Hope everybody's having a good one today. I want to go over some back tests. I'm trying to remember how to use Zoom. I haven't used Zoom in a while. I used to remember Zoom wasn't too bad. Okay, here we go. All right, we have six back tests. The only reason we have six is because each sheet, well, it's not because each sheet, each sheet on Portfolio Visualizer can compare three back tests. Well, I wanted to make a better version of all three back tests. So I made a sheet two with a so anyway, there's gonna be six back tests. And I want to share both sheets with you at the end of this. The whole idea I wanted to make an honest evaluation of living off these high yield funds. Could a person live off these high yield funds? Well, there's only been a handful, 5 or 10 funds that have been around longer than 5 or 10 years, covered call funds. There's First Trust has one. Their Invesco has one, but I really like Global X. Global X and they have a great website and they have great transparency. They show you how much premium they earn every month and then how much they pay out. But they pay out 12%. But it's just a good, for me, the QYLD is a good benchmark. So I want to be able to go back and look at these covered call funds and see if they would have hurt your portfolio performance over the course of 8 years, 10 years to see if they could play a part and how much income you might be able to get and that kind of stuff. Okay, so we're going to use Portfolio Visualizer. So this is based on what has happened. This doesn't mean this will happen again. But if a person had retired 8 years ago and done this, this is what that would have happened to them. So maybe this will dispel some of the myths about these high yield ETFs, and maybe not, and maybe it'll reinforce some of your beliefs. So that's up to you. I'm not telling you what to believe. I'll share the sheet with you, and then you can put in your own particulars and change it to make it. If I put in the bad funds or whatever, if you know a better fund, put in yours. But anyway, I thought this was a good benchmark. So 80/20 is just a great place to start. I've always said before 60/40 portfolio with 60 stock, 20 bonds, and 20 high yield funds. Well, we've got the 20 high yield funds. We're going to forget about the bonds for now because it just muddies the water. So 80/20, that's kind of our base case. That's just, that's kind of the minimum accepted. So let's see how that would have done. I had a feeling that would do pretty well. And sure enough, 16%. That beat the benchmark, which is just a Vanguard fund, a Vanguard 500 total market fund, beat the benchmark over 8 years by 2.7%. Pretty good standard deviation. You want that number to be as low as possible, and you want this number to be as low as possible. 30%, 30% max drawdown in 8 years. Great job, right? Okay. Well, let's go to portfolio two. So I tried to make an improvement. So what I did is I forgot about the Qs and I did 50% leverage Qs, which is TQQQ. They give you 3 times the daily results, positive and negative. Well, so we did 50% of that. But then I also did 10% of the short Qs. So I bet against myself, probably not smart. Should have just probably done 40% of the long Qs instead of 50 and 10. Anyway, I just wanted to see how or if that could work. Then I put in this Dorsey Wright fund that I really like. It's it's not inverse. It's actually a short fund. They pick bad stocks and short them, or they pick stocks that have low momentum and low whatever the metrics they look at, and they short them. So it does really well when the market goes down. And then I have a fund called TEL, which is a TEL risk fund, which can also provide some protection. So I thought this fund might be all right, even though it had a lot of leverage just because of the protection, just because of the 10% TEL and the 10% Dorsey Wright. Well, I was wrong. It did all right. It outperformed the index, but it had a gigantic drawdown. The standard deviation was pretty high too. It was about 20% higher than the kind of the benchmark than this one. So portfolio two, this over 8 years, this was more risky, less rewarding. So that one in hindsight would not have been a good portfolio. It doesn't mean that might not be a good mix going forward. That's the tough thing is going forward. But back in hindsight, that was not optimal. So I'm trying to find out what would have been optimal. So then I thought maybe if somebody was really aggressive on the short side, maybe like you did 40% TQQQ for your stock, then that leaves you plenty of capital because that's leveraged. But so then I figured, wonder if you did 40% in the Dorsey Wright short fund, and then 20% in QYLD. They all have 20% in QYLD because that's a good benchmark. What I'm really testing is QYLD more so than these other ones. But you'll see in a second, it's how they work together though. Because QYLD its NAV does not do really well. So you want to pair it with stuff that gets extra upside, I think. And that's kind of what I've done. Okay. So this portfolio, from the looks of it, I think was pretty good. I was happy to do this one, excited. Yeah, it didn't do terrible. I mean, the return's not terrible, but the drawdown's still kind of high. But the standard deviation's pretty good. I mean, this was a good place to start, I thought. I like this better than portfolio too. So anyway, so now the next thing we're going to look at, well, let's just look at this. The starting balance is $1 million. Ending balance will be 2.6. Portfolio B, which we don't like, 2.4. Portfolio C, which I do like, or 3, which I do like, it actually have less of an ending balance than this one. I just didn't like the gigantic drawdown on this one, but in any event, okay. Then you can see over here just what the index does by itself. So they all beat the index. The index only had a 23% drawdown. They all had a higher drawdown than the index. So when you add in that 20% QYLD, that's what I'm showing you. It adds, it's right there versus somebody that just has 100% the index. You added over 8 years to your max drawdown in this study. You added 20%. But that would make sense because you aren't 100% in stock, you're 80% stock, then 20% in this other asset, which doesn't do great as far as NAV goes, we all know. So anyway, that's interesting there. Okay. I also think it's interesting that the highest Sharpe ratio and the highest Sortino is portfolio A, but and portfolio A actually also beats the benchmark. That's pretty impressive. So anyway, portfolio A, you could do a lot worse than portfolio A. So anyway, we could do better than all of them. I was just thinking there could be an improvement on all of them. So they all grew. This is the performance over the years. You can see this is like a buffer report. The one on the far right's the index. So you can see in this last year, they all did about the same as index. Portfolio 3 did a little better. Now in 2023, they all of them did better. Okay. That's good. I mean, double the return. Now, unfortunately, in a down year, they all did worse. Portfolio 1 did the least bad of the other ones because it didn't have any leverage. Then in 2021, not a great year. They all underperformed the index, but 2020, they all beat the index, and portfolio 1 beat it pretty bad. Selling that volatility really helped in 2020. There was a lot of volatility in the market. That was probably that was a good situation there. 2019 also, all of them beat the index. 2 and 3 by a pretty decent margin. In 2018, now who can even remember 2018? But the fund 2 with the maximum leverage had the worst results. It was down 15%, where the index was down 10%. That would make sense because it's about 50% more risky, because I believe the allocation was like 50% triple leverage Qs, I think. So anyway, but that's yeah, and sure enough, it was down the most. It was down 15%. What was that in 2 again? Yeah, 2 was 50% triple leverage Qs. And I tried to offset it by 10% inverse Qs and 10% Dorsey Wright and then 10% tail risk, but that portfolio couldn't be saved. Okay, so now all I did is I just copied those portfolios to the next sheet. So I started at those portfolios, but then modified them somewhat, and I tried to make better ones. And I know we didn't look at the income on the last one because those weren't the ones we want to look at the income at anyway. We're going to look at the income on the next ones. But the income's the only reason we're even studying this or we even care about QYLD. We're trying to see the most efficient way to own 20% QYLD without giving up too much upside. That's okay. So number one, I had just 50% regular Qs and 20% triple Qs. I thought that made a lot of sense. I thought that made a lot of sense. And then of course they all have 20% QYLD for income, and then 10% of the Dorsey Right. So I thought that was a pretty sane, pretty, decent portfolio. Sure enough, 18% return, beat the benchmark, kind of a high drawdown, decent standard deviation. That's not a bad place to start. So I thought I was going the right direction. So then portfolio 2 on the second sheet, I got a little bit, I tried to get too fancy, 30% Qs and then 30% triple Qs. This one was a bad idea. I tried to do too much. It was a bad idea. Now, it did have good protection though. I mean, it had a low standard deviation. So I took stuff from that to make this one. And so this one I think is the best one now on this sheet, or it's the one I was kind of refining towards. 60% Qs and then 10% triple Qs, then 20% QYLD, and then 10% in the Dorsey Right Fund. And this one did really well. Look at this, 16% return, beat the benchmark, really low standard deviation, low drawdown. I think this may be my favorite of the 6 of them. Okay, but now let's get in here and let's see what the metrics tell us. So the metrics tell us, as far as total return goes, number 1 on this sheet was the best. And that's fine. But if you look at Sharpe and Sortino ratio, number 3 wins on all of them. So, but it doesn't win on all. There's another metric, a more important metric that it doesn't win on. But I thought that was good for the portfolio 3. Portfolio 3 is a tough to beat portfolio, I think. They all have great return. We're trying to interfere with the return as little as possible. They're all beating the index or close. Okay, here's the annual returns of these portfolios. It's about like the other ones. Okay, now income. This is important. It looked pretty much the same on the other sheet. But so started in 2018, 20% QYLD in 2018 gets you $11,000 income. Okay, it doesn't sound like a lot of income, but as your portfolio grows, your income can grow along with it. So now the same thing, it's the same amount of QYLD, but it's QYLD that's appreciated along with the rest of it, along with the NASDAQ. So you take advantage of the appreciation. And now, this past year, it would have been $100,000 income. Now, the portfolio I like, 3, only got 88,000. So if you really needed more income, portfolio 3 may not be for you, but that's why you should get a planner. You and your planner can go through all this stuff, but it's just interesting to have options. But for somebody that likes safety and 88,000 is enough, it's like I say, get your own planner. But anyway, so there's another metric that I really like more than any metric on here, because to me, it's the can you live off these things metric, or how well can you live off these? I've been trying to invent a metric this good, and I found it very in Portfolio Visualizer, but it's now kind of my baseline metric. But all of this is interesting. When I share this with you guys, you can get something off of all of these. It'll show you to the penny everything, every expense ratio you pay, everything. It shows you up market performance, down market performance compared to the benchmark, when it beats the benchmark, when it doesn't. If you're into that kind of stuff, the first thing you should do when I share this with you is go put your own, retirement, your own account size in it, and go maybe put your own allocations in portfolio 1, what you have now. And then maybe 2, what you're thinking about doing, and maybe 3, another idea. And then you can look, okay, I have this, but I'm thinking about this and this. Then you have something to go to your planner and talk to him about. But this is really interesting, and it shows you the inflation on the years. That it shows you everything here. So you can see here how well the hedge one worked. This isn't a video on the Dorsey Wright short fund, but it's an interesting fund. I mean, it's an interesting fund. Okay, that shows your max drawdowns, blah, blah, blah. Okay, here's a really important metric that I really, really, really like. It's right at the bottom. I guess it's underneath these. Right here. This is all your risk and return metrics. This is all your monthly, annual. This is stat stuff. Geometric mean, standard deviation, downside deviation. Anyway, I really like here the upside and downside capture. This is everything. Okay, portfolio 3, the one I liked, got 102% of the upside and only got 93% of the and only caught 93% of the downside. So to me, that's like 9% good to the good. That here's if you have the index. The index catches 100 up and 100 down, right? Okay, but these strategies with the buffer and the allocation and the inverse funds can give you a little bit different return. Now, portfolio 1 is way more high powered, and you can see it. It catches 127% of the upside and only catches 115 of the downside. So this is a decent idea too, if you like more upside and downside. And then 2 was kind of a 2 just wasn't that great because you didn't catch all the upside and you were catching more than all the downside. And we kind of looked at, even without looking at these ratios and these metrics, we could kind of tell that by looking at it. 2 on neither page was not good. But the best, if you could put one metric on these funds, and I just discovered this, I bet the guys in my room will like this thing, perpetual withdrawal rate. This is the 4% rule, but this is what you could if you use strategy 1 and the next 8 years were like the last 8 years, you could have a perpetual safe withdrawal rate of 11%. I mean, that's the idea. Normally planners will tell you 4%. Well, if you look over here, even just using the index, you can withdraw 8%. Remember, that's over a really good time period. Sequence of events, sequence of returns matters when you retire. If you retire, next year, and then the year after, we have 3 down years in a row. I mean, we have to factor for that. Not everyone gets lucky enough to retire in 2018 when the market goes on a face-ripping rally for 7-8 years, with the exception of 2022. Okay, but I thought this was interesting. So according to the computer likes portfolio 1 better also. I think this one's better, but I'm going to say the one that has the better perpetual withdrawal rate is the better portfolio. So now that we have this brand new metric, I still think this portfolio 3 on sheet B is the best, but I want to go back to sheet 1 real quick and look at the same metrics and see how, if any of the things on sheet 1 compare against the same metrics. Remember, these are statistics and theoretical, and but it's still interesting to look at. It's right here. It is. Okay, so just to refresh our memory, we didn't really like 2 on this sheet. I liked 3, but 1 was kind of the benchmark. And so look, sure enough, 1 was just 80-20. That's a great strategy because you catch 106% of the upside and you only get 97% of the downside. And so don't let people tell you QYLD doesn't get some upside. I mean, it's you get some return for QYLD and you do get some buffer, because all that fund is Qs and QYLD. There's nothing else in there. But in any event, perpetual withdrawal rate. So look, the perpetual withdrawal rate, they didn't like my portfolio 3 over here. They really liked 1 the best, which doesn't surprise me. So 1 on both sheets 1. So 80-20 is 10.28. And this one right here, which is an improvement on 80-20, I think is 11.5. So let's look at the winner one more time. Say it's not necessarily may not be the winner for your account or whatever, just is the winner over these past 10 years. So all it was 50% just the regular Qs and then 20% the triple Qs. So what you're doing is just, you've heard about, there's funds out there that do return stacking. They use a little bit of leverage and they stack returns on top of each other. Well, I think this would be similar to that because I'm trying to recreate the safety of a 60-40 or an 80-20, but some extra return. And so I think the 20 here is more like we're double. I know it's triple leverage, but in reality, so I think you're basically getting. Well, I guess we could just look at the upside and downside capture, but you can just see here, you're instead of getting 60% or even 80% like in a normal allocation, you're getting more like 90 because this 20 is worth 40 plus you're getting 50 normally. That's 90. So you're just getting a, that's you're trying to get a little, bonus in there. Now, what you have to do though, there's an expense to that. You have to rebalance monthly. Be sure you have rebalance monthly set on here. When you're using leverage funds, especially, it'll give you unrealistic results if you don't. But leverage funds decay and erode. They're the OG decayer and eroders. And so when there's a rebalancing cost to them when you have to rebalance monthly. But if you don't do it that way, they won't give you the protection you think you have. I had to find that out the hard way. But in any event, all right, portfolio one is the winner of all sheets. So, what I really like about portfolio one on this sheet anyway is the income. I mean, the returns are good. I mean, it had the worst returns here, but it had the best returns in 2019, best returns in 2020. It tied in 2021, worst returns in 2022, best returns in 23, best returns in 24. To start with 11,000 income 8 years ago, and just as the portfolio grows, the income grows as well because when you rebalance and the other funds are going up in value, and so now that same portfolio is just cracked 6 digits, and that's before taxes and stuff. And nowadays there's probably better options out there than QYLD. Nowadays there's probably people doing similar stuff than this, but maybe even using a little bit more safety or leverage somewhere. But as far as going back and testing like a long period of time and trying to see if we could actually live off something, it looks like if a guy had $1 million 8 years ago and they could live off, 12,000 the first year and 30,000 in year 3 and 40,000 in year 4 or 5 and 50, if they could live off 12 to 50,000, you could have lived off it and your portfolio could have grown. So maybe I should do one next time with the guy that needs about twice as much income. Like right now, he can't do 12 at first. Needs 50 at first or something. So that'd probably be a more realistic test, 12, 24. So with the first 4 years, we would want to double the allocation or 4x the allocation to yield somehow, or make it more, because no one's going to, I realize no one's going to live off 12,000. You could do this if you were going to be semi-retired for 5 years. And if the market went up, this guy did well because the market went up. All the other investments did well. And the Dorsey Wright helps a lot more than you guys realize. It may not look like it does, but it smooths out no one wants to be down 40%. If one of those is down 44%, no one has time for any of that. But anyway, you can go back in here and dissect everything, which asset had which return, which year, and how much it helped you and everything. I'm sure you guys will find a lot of stuff that I didn't find, but let's see if I'll challenge you guys. See, and I'm sure you can. This is a stupid challenge, but here's what, is that it? I'm sorry. Here's what the challenge is. The challenge is try to make a higher safe withdrawal rate. You should have to use the same dates though. Using the same dates that I did, if you want to, make a higher perpetual withdrawal rate than portfolio 1 on sheet 2, the one that was 50 Qs, 20 triple Qs, then 20 QYLD and 10 inverse. Because that is a pretty good portfolio. Why didn't I like that portfolio the first time? Let's go back and look at that. I think it just had too much downside, in my opinion. 38's not terrible. This portfolio is a good portfolio. I'll know what I was thinking. Mathematically, it's the best portfolio. It's just that I'm a scaredy, and I was looking at the potential for downside, and this has more of it. And we saw that in the stats. It caught like 15% of the downside, but it got like 130% of the upside. So it still had a net gain. All right, guys, I hope you find this as interesting as I do. I will talk to you later. Go to my Discord. I'll put a link to my Discord. Go to my Discord. If you have any questions, put it in Discord. All right, guys, I appreciate it. See you.